We're joined in studio now by our chief foreign editor here at France 24, Robert Parsons. So, Robert, just news coming into us earlier this morning, another Israeli raid into Gaza. What exactly do we know about what has happened there in the last 24 hours or so?
It doesn't seem to have been quite as big as the one the previous night, but the aim seems to be pretty much the same. They're probing, trying to find out where Hamas has its anti-tank positions, where its command and control centres are, where it's possible to get rid of them. It sounds like it was a joint operation involving ground forces, air forces, plus unmanned drones as well. According to the Israelis, there were no casualties. It was a successful operation. But I imagine there will be more and more of these as the Israelis build up to the moment when the ground offensive itself takes place, as they try to get information about where Hamas is positioned.
But is international pressure going to force Israel to perhaps back down from that anticipated offensive?
I don't think so. I mean, there is absolutely nothing to indicate at the moment that the Israeli authorities, either the government or the Ministry of Defense or the Army Command, are backing away from their determination to carry out that ground offensive. There are questions that are being asked about why the delay, because they've been in position now for quite a long time, from very soon after Hamas launched its attack on the 7th of October. And they are there in very large numbers. So the longer the time passes without them doing anything, the more questions will be asked, the more pressure the more the pressure will increase on the Army Command to do something. And the more morale, I would suggest, will probably start to go down in the military itself and in the population too. And it's very interesting that, about 3 days after the Hamas attack, an opinion poll was carried out. 65% of the population were in favour of launching a ground offensive. Today, that's dropped down to 29%. So the planners of this military operation have to be really conscious of where the public stands. And at the moment, perhaps because of the concern about the hostages that are in Gaza, apparently 224 of them, popular opinion is beginning to sway away from the idea of a ground offensive.
Assuming it does happen, though, it's going to be a major undertaking, isn't it?
It is. It's an absolutely major undertaking of the sort that Israel has never carried out before. Yes, it's been in Gaza in the past, 2014, but this is a much bigger operation that they're planning. The force that they've assembled is colossal. And the aim, to the extent that one can work out what the military aim of the operation is going to be, seems to be to uproot Hamas in its entirety. What that looks like in the final sum of things is a bit hard to discern at the moment, but there's no doubting the ambition. When it comes up against the reality, things may be very different. This rather reminds one of what the Americans undertook first of all in Fallujah in Iraq, and then the Iraqi army, supported by the Americans in the air, did in Mosul. But the comparison isn't entirely accurate, because what the Israelis are trying to do in Gaza is going to be much more difficult. Mosul was an offensive that took around about 9 months. There were 10,000 at its peak ISIS operatives inside Mosul. But the ground was fairly similar, with warrens, small streets, underground tunnels, that sort of thing. Hamas has had much longer to prepare, and its fighters are better trained than ISIS were. Plus, they know the ground very much better, and there are far more of them than there were of ISIS. There are around about 40,000 Hamas operatives, it's believed, in Gaza at the moment, plus Islamic Jihad. So the operation is going to be very, very difficult for the Israelis. They'll be going up against booby traps, underground tunnels, prepared positions, drones up above. The terrain is going to be very difficult, partially destroyed. Casualties will be very, very heavy. And the air offensive will continue as well. And what is certain is civilian casualties will start to tick up. And when that happens, world opinion is going to turn even more against the Israelis. And when the Israelis' casualties start to tick up as well, they'll start thinking, well, perhaps it will be easier and less costly for us to use air attacks. And the more the air attacks go in, the more the international pressure will tick up again. So, they're going to have to operate quite quickly. The Israelis are talking about months But I think the reality is that they'll have far less time than that.
Okay.